Tokenization is absolutely exploding everywhere you look. And here's the thing I've been saying all along. If we want tokenization to really take off and go mainstream, stablecoins are going to be the secret sauce that makes it all work. Think about it this way. Once you've got your assets living on the blockchain as tokens, what happens next? You're going to want to actually do stuff with them, buy them, sell them, trade them around, maybe even use them as collateral for loans. For all of that to work smoothly, you need something stable to price everything in, something that isn't going to swing wildly in value while you're trying to make a deal. That's where stablecoins come in. They're basically your traditional fiat currencies, but dressed up in blockchain clothes, giving you that rock-solid foundation to build on. We've got USD and plenty of other fiat currencies already living on blockchains as stablecoins, which is awesome. But when it comes to Ripple and XRP, there's one stablecoin that's really got everyone's attention, RLUSD. So picture this. Back in early July, BNY Mellon drops this huge announcement that they've been handpicked to be the main custodian for Ripple's enterprise stablecoin reserves. They're basically saying, we're joining forces for Ripple USD, BNY, and Ripple to make digital assets a reality for major institutions and bridge that gap between traditional finance and the crypto world. Here's why this news hit like a ton of bricks. BNY Mellon isn't just some random financial company. We're talking about a titan that manages over $50 trillion in assets. That's an absolutely insane amount of money. So, when one of the most established blue-chip financial giants on Earth decides to team up with Ripple to safeguard RLUSD's reserves, the entire crypto community basically had their jaws on the floor. And now, here's why I'm circling back to that July announcement, because we just got some fresh news that's pretty huge. OpenEdenX just announced they're teaming up with BNY Mellon for investment management and custody services for their tokenized U.S. Treasury bills fund. What's really cool about this is how OpenEden's tokenization tech is meshing with BNY's investment know-how and asset management skills. They're calling it a major breakthrough for real-world assets, and honestly, they're not wrong. This is exactly the kind of thing that shows how serious everyone's getting about supporting tokenized assets from start to finish. OpenEden put it perfectly in their announcement. They're saying this partnership with BNY is a game changer for their goal of creating secure, transparent, tokenized financial products that institutions can actually trust and use. When you combine OpenEden's tokenization platform with BNY's massive global reach and all that fiduciary expertise they've built up over the years, you're basically creating a whole new playbook for how trust and accessibility work in the digital asset world. BNY's take on this is pretty telling to it. They're positioning themselves as that crucial bridge between old-school finance and all this new blockchain tech. They're pumped to bring their proven liquidity management and safekeeping services to the T-bill space, and they're clearly all in on working with OpenEden to handle tokenized assets from soup to nuts. But here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly kind of mind-blowing. Remember back on August 1st, 2024? OpenEden actually teamed up with Ripple to bring tokenized U.S. Treasury bills right onto the XRP Ledger. We're talking about the exact same T-bills that are front and center in this brand new announcement with BNY from August 13th, 2025. The numbers tell an incredible story too. When you look at the XRP Ledger on rwa.xyz, there's $190 million locked up there, and it's shot up over 60% just in the last month. OpenEden? They're sitting pretty as the second biggest player on the XRP Ledger with $75.5 million. And get this, that's up a whopping 1,300% in just 30 days. OpenEden's total footprint is even more impressive at around $560 million on-chain, up 15% this past month. Most of their action is still happening on Ethereum, but they've got solid presence on XRP, Solana, Arbitrum, and Base too. What's absolutely wild about all this is watching these major players who have ties to the XRP Ledger or Ripple start linking up with heavyweight institutions like BNY, the same BNY that's already working with Ripple. It's like seeing all these connections form right before our eyes. This convergence isn't just happening in theory anymore, it's actually playing out in real time. The XRP Ledger itself is definitely seeing some serious growth in value, but when you zoom out and look at the bigger tokenization picture, things have been pretty stagnant. We're sitting at around $13.13 billion in total tokenized value, and honestly, that hasn't budged much over the past month. I've got a feeling we're about to see this space absolutely explode, though. Here's the thing. Regulators are finally starting to make some real moves, both here in the US and internationally. Hong Kong's been crushing it with their tokenization initiatives, and you can just feel the momentum building. Right now, it feels like everything's kind of frozen in place, and I think that's because we're all just holding our breath waiting for those key regulatory decisions to drop. It's like that moment right before a dam breaks. Once we get that regulatory clarity, I think we're going to see this $13 billion number shoot through the roof. The groundwork is all there. We're just waiting for the green light. Check this out. Ripple's got their eyes on a massive $19 trillion opportunity. This announcement dropped just 3 days ago, and honestly, it's pretty exciting stuff. So here's the deal. Ripple's positioning themselves right at the center of this huge $19 trillion revolution. We're talking about tokenizing real-world assets. Everything from treasuries and gold to equities, real estate, you name it. And trust me, this tokenization thing is about to explode in a big way. Look, even if we have to wait a bit for this to play out, I'm totally cool with being patient because I know it's going to be worth it. Right now, we've got about $13 billion on-chain versus that $19 trillion target. That's absolutely insane growth potential. And get this, XRP is sitting at number 9 for RWA value right now. But here's where it gets interesting. XRP Ledger just hit number 2 in RWA growth over the past 30 days. It's really starting to pick up steam, jumping over 50%. When you actually dive into the numbers from the last month, well, you can see it all laid out in the full market overview. So when you look at those 30-day gains, XRP's sitting pretty at almost 61%. Not too shabby. Compare that to Binance Smart Chain, which is absolutely crushing it with over 1,500% gains because they're adding tons of RWA value. But here's what I love seeing. The XRP Ledger is definitely growing in value, and that's exactly what we want to happen. This is really good stuff. The momentum around tokenization is definitely building up steam. Will XRP Ledger snag that top spot soon? Well, it depends on which spot we're talking about. Honestly, I'm not losing sleep over hitting that number 1 growth position in the 30-day charts. What I'm really keeping my eye on is the overall value across all these networks. Some of these, like ZK Sync Era, aren't even layer 1, so I basically just ignore those completely. But with Ethereum sitting at over $7 billion, I'm pretty confident we're going to see these networks blow up big time over the next few weeks and months, especially as more announcements drop and we get serious money actually flowing on-chain. These things don't happen overnight. It takes time for stuff to actually hit the public networks. So, yeah, I'm expecting that landscape to shift pretty soon. And here's the kicker. We've been hearing tons of chatter about tokenization from the SEC lately. Check this out. Justin, who's an SEC commissioner, just dropped some major talk about tokenization regulation. Everyday investors are pouring in like crazy. You've got traditional finance and crypto companies teaming up left and right. This tokenized future, it's coming at us fast. Take a look at this.
But I do want to move on, and I want to talk about tokenization. That obviously another big hot topic of the moment. And when we're talking about everyday investors getting involved with tokenization, what are some of the risks in your view that could potentially come about?
Well, I think there has been a lot of interest in tokenizing securities and other real-world assets, and that's something that really opened up after the SEC changed its perspective on crypto. So we're seeing a lot of interest from traditional financial firms and native crypto firms. And there are different approaches that are being taken to tokenizing. So we will work with people. We're willing to work with people who are taking different approaches. But it's really important that people be very careful about disclosing what the nature of the asset is. When you tokenize something, it's still a security. If you're tokenizing a security, it may be a security with different characteristics, and that's something that needs to be conveyed to investors. And it's also important to be aware of sometimes there are trading restrictions, or there are restrictions on who can access particular types of securities, and so that's something people have to pay attention to.
And that's a point that you've made in the past, that tokenized securities are still securities. You do have some firms, I'm thinking of Robinhood, for example, rolling out tokenized stock trading. I believe that's taken hold in Europe. So, I mean, do you see that as a potential area where you could run into some of these confrontations over firms trying to really regulate and innovate and introduce measures such as that, but potentially coming up against some of these regulations that you're putting in place?
Well, without talking about any particular firm's approach, I think the bottom line is that we encourage firms to come in and talk to us. We expect that there will be some different approaches taken to tokenizing, and we're looking forward to working with folks to try those different models out and see what the market's like, and see whether or not tokenization of equity securities takes hold. I mean, that really will ultimately be up to the market. But what our message is that we're willing to work through different potential models with people.
That $13 billion in RWA value sitting on chain? Look, I need you guys to get this. We're basically in the trial run phase here. These massive institutional players are just testing the waters, throwing some asset classes on chain to see what happens. That's exactly why these regulators are chatting it up and tackling this whole tokenization puzzle. They want to kick the tires on a few things, run some experiments. We're still in that let's see what works phase. Once we get through this testing phase, they're going to flip the switch into full scaling mode, and that number on chain is about to explode 5, 10, maybe even 100 times over and fast. So while we're watching all this unfold, we're also tuning into what these big organizations are actually saying. The SEC's talking, and get this, the US government just dropped a whole document about tokenization and how they're backing it. But here's what really caught my attention. The World Economic Forum just announced on the 12th that financial markets are undergoing a quiet revolution powered by asset tokenization. And you know what? They're absolutely right. This is happening right now. The crazy part? Most people aren't even paying attention to this. Like, if you actually dive into what they're saying, they're literally telling us that financial markets are going through this quiet revolution powered by asset tokenization. Asset tokenization is about to change the game, making investing way more accessible, faster, cheaper, and totally transparent. When you get institutions, regulators, and tech companies working together to build trust and systems that actually talk to each other, that's when tokenization really takes off. And guess what? That's happening right now. We're moving into the scaling phase next, which is honestly mind-blowing when you think about the numbers we're dealing with. We're talking trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars here. The World Economic Forum dropped a report back in 2021 saying blockchain could disrupt $867 trillion worth of assets. That number's only gotten bigger since then. We're talking 4+ years of growth. So when you look at what's really happening, Ripple's where our attention is. These networks like XRP already have massive amounts of money flowing through them. There are definitely some other solid players too. Stellar comes to mind. Look, we could definitely talk about Ethereum from a technical angle, but honestly, what's really catching my attention is all these partnerships and major collaborations happening left and right. Just recently, Ripple and Control Alt joined forces to tackle real estate tokenization. That was July 16th. Then you've got Ripple working with Artix to bring hundreds of millions in tokenized real-world assets straight to the XRP Ledger. Don't forget about their partnership with Zonix back in 2024. Again, all about tokenization. And there's the Axler integration from February 2024, which was specifically designed to get RWAs on chain. When you step back and look at the big picture, all these pieces are really starting to click together for Ripple, the XRP Ledger, and XRP itself. Here's something I've mentioned tons of times before. If you actually hop on Ripple's website and check out their solutions section, I think it's under custody, then click on tokenization. Boom! Right there. It shows you that their whole tokenization game is built around the XRP Ledger. So here's the thing. When Ripple's working with all these institutional heavyweights, these enterprises, these major players, what they're really doing is creating this pipeline to funnel all of them into the tokenization space through the XRP Ledger. That's exactly why everyone's talking about this massive $19 trillion opportunity that Ripple's going after. They get it. As institutional adoption keeps ramping up faster and faster, the value flowing on-chain is going to explode right alongside it. Plus, they totally understand we're still in the early innings of tokenization. The value we're seeing on-chain right now? It's basically pocket change compared to what we're going to be targeting in the next few years. All right, that wraps it up. Hope you guys got something out of this one. If you did, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and definitely turn those notifications on for more free content coming your way. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Catch you in the next one.